Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the ABC of Drawing. Today, I'll show you how to draw a person in full height. Some of you have been asking for this video, and though I delayed it because of its complexity, I'm now ready to share some effective techniques with you. So what are you going to see in today's video? I'll be using two drawings, one male and one female, to explain the theory and practice, addressing proportions and the balance of the figure. As always, I'll throw in plenty of useful tips and tricks, so I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Now, a quick heads up before we get started. I'll be simplifying a lot in this video, even sacrificing accuracy in some places due to the broad topic. I apologize in advance. Drawing the human figure usually requires more than one video, perhaps a whole series. Let's see how this one goes, and maybe we'll consider a sequel. Let's kick things off by distinguishing between approaches and techniques for tracing and drawing the body. They are slightly different. Think back to portrait lessons. For instance, Andrew Loomis's technique is excellent for drawing but less suitable for tracing from a photo. Techniques designed specifically for tracing differ significantly. In the context of drawing a human figure, I won't delve into tracing today. Generally, I do tracing with a sketch-like approach, marking reference points, outlining large masses and forms with lines, and refining gradually based on the photo. I'll delve into this more when we'll be discussing sketching. Now, let's focus on drawing the figure. When we see a complex image or drawing, we often see the end result, like this one. However, it's crucial to understand that this result always follows construction, building from simple lines, shapes, or figures. This applies 100% to drawing the human figure. Artists approach construction differently based on their preferences and style. In art classes, we were taught to use ovals and circles, but variations with parallelepipeds and lines, or just lines, also exist. Personally, I prefer a simplified skeleton approach. Starting with something simple helps us concentrate on the essentials, proportions, and the harmonious placement of body parts. Later, this construction can serve as a foundation to add muscles, fat, or clothing if needed. I'll show you how it works shortly, but first, let's talk about proportions, because constructing without them is challenging. The most popular proportion measurement method, likely seen by all of you in diagrams, is based on measuring proportions relative to the head. It's simple, which probably explains its popularity. But remember, it's not the only method out there. For instance, there's the Hale method, where we begin with the size of the skull box, or the palm measurement method, among others. But I don't want to get too deep into all that right now, because I don't want to confuse you. Plus, I'm not really a fan of these super detailed proportion methods, because firstly, they're complicated, and secondly, if you follow everything, drawing starts feeling almost like drafting with a ruler. Remember the most important thing. All those diagrams you've seen show so-called ideal proportions. In real life, though, they can vary within wide limits. So, let's simplify proportions. Let's go with the option where the body consists of 8 heads. What do you need to keep in mind? Let's go from bottom to top. From feet to knees, about 2 heads fit. Knees and thighs to the groin are the same size. Notice that the groin area is in the middle, and roughly in the same area are the joints of the arm and hand. The elbow is around the waist area, on the 5th line. If you look closely at the scheme, you'll see the lower part of the arm from the wrist to the elbow is slightly larger than the head. The upper part, elbow to armpit, will be equal to the head in width. In a man's shoulders, 2 heads fit. In a woman's, 1.5. That's about it. Sure, the diagram shows other ratios and proportions, but what I've shared will be enough. Let's move on to drawing. Start by drawing a vertical segment near your intended drawing area. It's better to do this by hand, and it doesn't have to be perfectly straight. The most important thing is lightness. A variant like mine is optimal. Next, eyeball it into 4 parts. First, the large segment in half, then the 2 smaller ones. You can check with a pencil, but you don't need to chase every millimeter. Now divide the upper half into 4 parts. And our makeshift ruler is ready. For your convenience, while I'm building the skeleton, I'll add this picture. I apologize for the poorly visible constructions, but it's necessary because during drawing, you'll have to erase a lot and draw many new lines. I recommend working the same way. Okay, let's start drawing our simplified skeleton. It's best to begin with the axis showing the body's pose or the spinal column, which I'm doing now. In our case, it's straight, as the body's pose is simple. The size is approximately half of the large segment. At the very top of the first segment, outline the head. You can use just an oval or, like me, a circle plus a jaw. By the way, we can use the circle later. Now draw the chest. First, outline the upper part of the lines in the middle of the second segment. The width of the lines is approximately 1.5 to 2 heads. Then the lower part at the level between the third and fourth segments. And draw an oval. At the top, it should be a little wider, and at the bottom, narrower. Next is the pelvis. Draw it slightly above the middle. Some prefer to leave it as a segment or spindle. Its length is approximately equal to the size of the head. There. But for me, an oval is more convenient. Now we need to attach arms and legs to this dummy. Depict attachment points with circles around the shoulder area, especially useful when drawing the deltoids. So the circles are large, about half the size of the head. Below this, it doesn't matter. Alright, attach the limbs. Start with the legs. In this body position, everything is straightforward, essentially working from the scheme. The thigh part with the knees goes to the sixth segment. Everything below is the shin bone and feet. You can show joints with small circles and feet with triangles. As for the arms, orient yourself by the scheme. The elbow circle is on the fourth segment. The wrist starts at the junction of the fourth and fifth. The size of the hand itself is approximately equal to the circle of the head. To make the body position harmonious, slightly lift the arms and place the legs shoulder-width apart. There you have it. Our little Terminator is ready. In the next stage, we'll add mass to this framework. I drew everything up close, not getting too caught up in every millimeter or proportion, since they tend to change anyway. If something's off, I fix it in the next stage when I add the details. In the second drawing, you'll see how much the finished work can change. The first drawing shows the simplest option, the basic pose, a good starting point for beginners. Gradually, you can make your work more complex. Over time, you can skip the ruler markings. I rarely do them separately. I incorporate them into the drawing, especially for complex poses, relying more on the ratio of body parts to each other. But you'll get there gradually. Now, I want to share an interesting exercise to prep for drawing complex poses. I'll demonstrate it on a graphics tablet, but it works without one. Choose photos of a person in full view with minimal clothing, so joints and articulations are clear. If you're using a tablet, transfer it to the software and make it slightly transparent. If not, just print it out. Inside the body, draw an internal skeleton as I showed you before. You can make a collection of these for reference. Practice is key in drawing, especially when drawing the body. I'll talk more about that later. For now, let's outline our blank. The same skeleton can be outlined differently, resulting in different body types. You can see this in the illustration. I'll draw a robust guy, Schwarzenegger type, with minimal clothing for better anatomy visibility. Here we go. You can start building volume in different ways. I find it most convenient to go from top to bottom, starting with the head. Draw a generalized silhouette without diving into details. Skill in muscle anatomy is handy, but I won't go into detail here. For those interested, there are artist atlases, and there's a diagram on the screen. Move down, drawing shoulders and arms. Sometimes it's possible to start with other parts, like the torso. Understand that body parts aren't just straight sticks. They have curves. In the arm, there are three. A bump around the shoulder, the deltoid muscle, triceps lower to the elbow, and forearm muscles. The male torso typically has a V-shaped silhouette. Consider this in your drawing. Legs also have their curves. For your first works, rely on a photo in a similar angle or pose. I'm almost done. What's left are hands and feet. They have their complexities. We need to draw the feet at a slight angle and show them in perspective without details. The same goes for hands. Draw them simplified, resembling claws. The silhouette is almost ready. Now erase unnecessary lines. And soften it by dabbing, not erasing strokes, to avoid accidentally removing anything. After all this, you get the figure's silhouette proportionate and symmetrical enough. But it still needs refinement, correction, and adding details inside. That's what I'll do in the next stage. Why not do it right away, you might ask? It's about priorities. At the beginning, focus on getting correct proportions and composing large volumes, saving detailing and details for later. That's what I'm doing now. It's not just a clean outline, but correction. A good comparison for all of this could be sculpting, like when a sculptor takes clumps of clay, shapes them into formless masses. Heads, hands, torsos, and other body parts. These are then refined, trimmed, or added to if needed. Finally, the detailing starts. In essence, a similar process is happening in my drawing. The level of detail for the body depends on the drawing type and style, as well as the amount of clothing. Since I have a bit of clothing in this one, I need to work on it. In the second drawing, you'll see the level of detail needed for clothing. As for anatomy, getting those right curves and lines inside, I do it from memory, relying on my experience. To beginners, I suggest using a photo as a base, not tracing, to develop your hand. Over time, you'll find you won't struggle with drawing certain curves, even in moderate detail like mine. I can vouch for this method because I learned this way myself. Now let's see how it turns out. Eventually, I'll do the final outline without corrections to make the drawing more complete and vivid. Okay, with the help of this drawing, I've roughly demonstrated one technique for drawing a person in full height. So, how do you take it to the next level? The key is to keep it simple. Start by mastering the basics. Create proportional, high-quality skeletons. Begin with easy poses and gradually make them more complex. Once you've got the hang of it, start adding mass and volume. You don't have to be as detailed as I am. You can go for simpler drawings, even throw in some clothing. At this point, focus on practicing more and delve into studying anatomy, not just in theory but also through drawings. As you progress, everything in your drawings should become more intricate: clothing, anatomy, details, and so on. Naturally, when you reach this stage, the info from this lesson might not be sufficient. You'll need to independently explore some additional material. If you're really passionate about drawing and want to master the human figure, I recommend checking out a YouTube channel called Proco. It's not an ad. I watch it sometimes, and it's on topic. Before we move on to the second drawing of the female figure in a more complex pose, let's talk about balance. This is crucial if you want to learn how to draw the body in motion so it looks natural. In essence, the main idea is quite simple. There are two large centers of mass in the body, the torso and the pelvis. They need to be constantly balanced. Arms and legs help with this and often serve as supports. To make it easier to understand how to balance the parts with each other, let's add a point. Imagine a conditional center of gravity. Draw a line down from the point. This will be our reference. If the posture is straight and symmetrical, the line goes through the middle, dividing the body into two parts. When a person stands on one leg, the bends of the body change, the center of gravity shifts, and accordingly, one leg moves towards the line. If the shift is strong, then the arms and the second leg can help balance. Here are some more examples. For instance, an older person moves, leaning on a cane. The weight is distributed over more points, and the line is between them. If there's some load, the person needs to take a pose to balance it. If the load is in front, like a sack, the torso moves back, and the center of gravity shifts behind the heels. If the load is on the back, you need to lean forward to avoid falling, shifting the center of gravity beyond the toes. The last example is walking. Essentially, walking is an uncontrolled fall. We move the center of gravity left or right, placing the necessary leg to avoid falling. No one thinks about it, but look at how challenging walking is for robots. To depict the human walking correctly, we need to change the tilt of the shoulders and pelvis. And you can also balance a bit with the arms. Naturally, to learn how to apply all this, practice is needed. Let's get to it. As I mentioned earlier, I'll be drawing a woman walking. This drawing is very similar to the first one, except for 3 moments. First moment, the female figure has its unique features. Second, we're focusing on drawing the figure with clothing. And the third one, I aim to capture a pose with a slight loss of balance in the walk. So, let's dive into the details on these 3 points. Now, check this out. On the side, I've got a makeshift ruler ready to go. It's just like when drawing the male figure, and overall, the approach to drawing remains the same. We kick things off with the framework. Since the figure is in a walking position, it'll have that typical hip sway and the spine axis bends. The female figure rocks an hourglass profile. Shoulders are narrower than a man's, and the pelvis is wider. In my case, I measure the upper part of the chest from the head's height, making the pelvis 1.5 times wider. Both of these lines have a slope, and one side becomes shorter than the other to show the turn. You might have noticed that all the proportions in height have gone up a bit. About 3/4 of a small segment. Why? Because I'm drawing a girl with long legs and a graceful build. To get the legs in the right place, I marked a point at the bottom, opposite the center of gravity. Now, here's the trick. Making the position a bit wobbly. Initially, I didn't twist the torso too much to the left to balance with the pelvis. Also, I'll draw the left leg a bit to the left of the center of gravity. The right leg will be a tad shorter, as it's behind and slightly bent. Now, let's figure out where to put the arms in a harmonious way. Alright, moving on to the next stage, overlaying the framework. The main difference from the first drawing lies in anatomy. Think hourglass curve, not a V shape. This is where I started drawing the torso, waist, and legs before the arms. Women's muscles are less pronounced, and everything except the pelvic part is drawn thinner. A quick note, the initial framework is just a guide. No need to stick to it like glue. For example, I thought the legs and thighs should be a bit wider, so I adjusted the skeleton line accordingly. By the way, those circles for leg attachment didn't need to be so big from the start. Once you've got the silhouette set, go ahead and erase the inner framework. If needed, you can also make it a bit softer, but only if it's necessary. Adjusting the outline follows the same principles as in the first case. The only thing to keep in mind is that since we're getting the drawing ready for clothing, you don't need to draw the anatomy details with too much precision. Now it's a breeze to draw some kind of dress. I'm no Coco Chanel, but I'll try to create something decent. Throw in a hat, sketch a natural face, and add shadows. I won't go into detail on each part. Let's just enjoy some pleasant music and see what we end up with. This lesson turned out quite comprehensive, and there's still more I haven't covered. I hope you found it interesting and picked up something new. That's a wrap. Wishing everyone good luck, creative success, and catch you in the next videos. Bye!